Hey guys, tonight we travel back to 272 BCE to the sun-baked valleys of the Peloponnese, where two of Greece's oldest rivals are about to face each other one last time. The cicadas hum in the olive trees, the air smells of dust, bronze and distant thunder. You're standing on the road between Sparta and Argos, two names that once ruled the Greek imagination, and soon one of them will fall for good. It's summer. The dry wind coming off the mountains carries the taste of iron, the hint of war. Argive scouts ride along the ridgelines, watching the horizon. They say a Spartan army is on the move again, banners glinting red in the light. The people of Argos, proud descendants of heroes, tighten their gates and sharpen their spears. They've been fighting Sparta on and off for 500 years, and somehow it always feels personal. You can hear the echo of that rivalry in every tavern and marketplace. They still think they're gods of war. They never forgive defeat. For centuries, these two cities have mirrored each other, both ancient, both proud, both obsessed with the memory of a vanished golden age. But this time, the stakes are different. Greece is no longer the world's centre. The Macedonians rule the north. The successors of Alexander squabble for scraps of empire. The days when cities like Sparta or Argos could shape history alone are fading fast. Still, they cling to their glory like dying stars. Sparta's last great hope now rides in the person of King Areus I, a descendant of Leonidas, whose bloodline is more legend than genealogy. Areus is clever and cautious, a general who reads the changing winds of power. He dreams of a Sparta reborn, not the closed, rigid Sparta of old, but a modern power that can stand beside Macedon as an equal. For him, every campaign is not nostalgia. It's a gamble to keep his city relevant in a world that's outgrown it. Argos, meanwhile, sees itself as the heir of civilization, not war. Its temples still gleam, its council still debates. The Argives pride themselves on their democracy, their culture, their trade. Yet they know they live under shadows, Sparta to the south, Macedon to the north, and now a third threat looming. Pyrrhus of Epirus, the restless king who once humbled Rome, and dreams of conquering Greece itself. You can almost feel the tension rising between the marble columns of Argos. Market stalls close early. Messengers run to and from the council chamber. Priests mutter about omens, a red moon, a falcon slain by an owl. The gods, they say, are tired of this rivalry. And yet, neither city will yield. Sparta and Argos have been locked in their dance of pride since the Bronze Age, when heroes were real and gods were nosy neighbours. They've traded victories and vengeance across generations. The Battle of Hysiae, the wars over Thyrea, the endless skirmishes along the Laconian border. Now, in the twilight of Greece's classical age, they're about to do it again. One final time, one final blaze of defiance before history moves on without them. You stand among the Argive hoplites as they check their gear. Polished helmets reflecting the sunset, shields painted with family crests, spears gleaming like rows of lightning bolts. Somewhere across the hills, Spartan soldiers do the same, their discipline silent, their resolve absolute. The sound of armour tightening, the smell of oil and sweat. It all feels ancient, ritualistic, inevitable. These men are fighting not for empire or plunder, but for memory, for what their ancestors were, and for the right to say they still matter. The sun sinks behind Mount Lycaon. The world turns bronze. In the distance you see the first glow of campfires on the horizon. The war drums of Sparta beat once, twice, echoing through the hills. History takes a slow breath. Tomorrow the old rivalry will ignite again, and one of Greece's oldest cities will burn for the last time. By dawn, the Peloponnesian sky burns gold, and the fields between Sparta and Argos shimmer with heat. The birds scatter from the olive groves as distant horns call the armies to formation. This land, scarred by centuries of feuds, feels the weight of history stirring once more. The dust that rises from marching feet might as well be the ghost of every Spartan and Argive who's ever fallen here. To understand what's coming, you need to see where Greece stands now. The old world, the age of Leonidas, Pericles, and Epaminondas, is gone. Alexander the Great has been dead for half a century and his empire lies in pieces. Macedonia rules the north, Egypt bows to the Ptolemies, Asia to the Seleucids. The once proud city-states of Greece are like aging lions, scarred, proud, and surrounded by jackals. In this fractured world, power belongs to those who can adapt. Athens survives through diplomacy and philosophy, Corinth through trade, but Sparta and Argos, they still cling to old gods and older grudges. Their rivalry has outlived empires, kings, and reason. Sparta, once the iron fist of Greece, is a shadow of its former self. Its rigid laws have eroded, its citizen ranks thinned. The days when an army of 300 could defy an empire are a memory recited at festivals. Yet something of the old fire remains. Every Spartan still grows up believing they're born for war, not compromise. They have no interest in art or debate, only in survival through strength. Their king, Areus I, understands this. He's not a warlord like his ancestors, he's a strategist. He's been trying to drag Sparta into the new age, forging ties with mercenaries, merchants, and foreign powers. But to the world beyond, the word Sparta still means one thing: warriors who never yield. And then there's Argos. Beautiful, cultured, arrogant Argos. Its streets are lined with marble statues and shaded courtyards. The city has traded steel for silver, hoplites for orators. It remembers its ancient myths with pride, the home of Hera's temple, of Perseus and his bloodline. It once rivaled Mycenae. It once defied kings. But that glory too is cracked and weathered. Argos now lives under Macedon's protection, balancing between survival and servitude. The irony isn't lost on anyone. Sparta, once the isolationist warrior state, now talks of alliances. Argos, once the free-spirited democracy, now bows to foreign kings. The world has turned upside down. In this shifting chaos, a new player enters the scene: Pyrrhus of Epirus, the restless conqueror who just can't stop fighting. He's the kind of man who wakes up each morning looking for a war that doesn't exist yet. After years of clashing with Rome and Macedon, he turns his gaze south toward the Peloponnese. He dreams of uniting Greece under his rule. To him, Sparta and Argos are just pieces on the board. When Pyrrhus lands in the Peloponnese with his seasoned veterans, the old cities tremble. They've heard of his elephants, his audacious tactics, his unpredictable fury. He's the living embodiment of ambition, part hero, part disaster. Areus, ever cautious, is away with his army in Crete when the news arrives. Pyrrhus is marching on Sparta. For the first time in centuries, the city of Leonidas stands vulnerable. No king, no full army, only its citizens, elders, and women to defend it. The story of that siege will become legend. But before it begins, the ripples reach Argos. Messengers ride hard through the passes, bearing news of Pyrrhus's advance. The council meets in panic. Some call for alliance, others for neutrality. The old men of Argos remember what happens when foreign kings come to save Greece. They stay. The city's strategoi sent envoys to both sides, playing the cautious game that has kept them alive for generations. In Sparta, though, the citizens don't wait. The women dig trenches, the youths sharpen spears, the elders recite the tales of Thermopylae. As the fires of Pyrrhus's army glimmer in the distance, they swear that no foreign king will breach their walls. And in the hills beyond, Pyrrhus himself surveys the land, his armour gleaming in the torchlight. He's fought Romans and Macedonians, Persians and barbarians. Yet this ancient city of warriors, fascinates him. To break Sparta, he says to his captains, is to break history itself. He smiles, that half-mad smile that history loves to give to men destined to fall. The stars above flicker like embers. The night before, the siege is quiet, too quiet. Dogs bark in the distance, then stop. Inside Sparta, mothers whisper to their sons. If you die, die facing the enemy, they say, so your ghost won't lose its way home. When dawn breaks, the war drums of Pyrrhus begin to beat, and in that moment, two ages of Greece collide, the old heroism of Sparta and the restless ambition of kings. The smoke from their torches rises together, twisting into the pale morning sky. The morning light breaks over the Eurotas valley, washing the Spartan walls in gold. Beneath the gleam, the people of Sparta prepare for the unthinkable. No invader has dared to assault the city itself since the Persian Wars, when even Xerxes' armies thought twice. Now, 5 centuries later, Pyrrhus of Epirus stands at her gates with an army of 30,000, veterans of Italy, champions of Macedon, and elephants that blot out the sun. The irony cuts deep. Sparta, the ancient master of war, is caught unready. Its king, Areus I, is still in Crete with the main Spartan force far across the Aegean. Only a skeleton garrison remains, a few thousand citizens, some older veterans and boys barely of age. For any other city it would mean surrender. For Sparta it means destiny. You can picture the scene from the walls, men binding leather greaves over weary legs, women carrying stones and jars of oil to the ramparts, children ferrying messages between the lines. The air smells of pitch and smoke. Among the defenders walks a woman whose name will echo through legend. Chelidonis, the daughter-in-law of King Areus. She is young, beautiful and unyielding. When Pyrrhus's herald calls for surrender, she stands upon the battlements and answers him herself. "If you seek our city, king, come and take it. But you'll find our women stand guard where your men fear to tread." The herald returns to his master, face pale. Pyrrhus laughs, not in mockery but in admiration. "So," he says, "Sparta has daughters worthy of her name." Then he gives the order to attack. His engineers move first, driving iron stakes into the earth, setting ladders against the walls, ordering sappers to dig. His elephants bellow, shaking the ground. The Spartans respond instantly. Their trumpets wail, their shields rise. Every citizen, from grey-haired veterans to unwed maidens, stands in formation. The first assault hits like thunder. Arrows rain down, rams crash against the gates. The elephants advance, their tusks wrapped in bronze, their trunks shrieking. For a moment the walls seem ready to buckle, but then the Spartans fight back the only way they know how, with invention and ferocity. They dig trenches in front of the walls to trap the beasts. They pour oil into the pits, set it aflame, and drive iron spikes into the embers. As the elephants stumble, the defenders unleash javelins and flaming torches. The night erupts in chaos. Beasts screaming, soldiers falling, flames licking the sky. From the ramparts, Chelidonis fights beside the men, hurling stones and shouting orders. When her father-in-law's friends urge her to seek safety, she answers, "If Sparta burns, I burn with her." The women follow her lead, forming human chains to haul stones, water and wounded men. It's a sight so fierce that Pyrrhus himself is said to have paused to watch, muttering, "They build warriors even in their kitchens." The battle lasts through the night. At dawn the city still stands. Pyrrhus's soldiers retreat to regroup, leaving hundreds dead in the trenches. The Spartans, though bloodied, cheer from the walls. For one night at least the gods have chosen them. In the brief silence that follows, smoke drifts across the plain. The scent of charred wood and blood hangs heavy. The fields outside the city are littered with bodies and broken ladders. The river runs dark, yet still the people of Sparta refuse to rest. They work through the morning, digging deeper trenches, stacking more stones, and reinforcing the gates. Inside the city the women gather at the temples. Chelidonis kneels before the statue of Artemis Orthia, her hands blackened from soot. She whispers a prayer not for victory but for endurance. "Let our city outlast this day," she murmurs. "Let us die as Spartans, not as shadows." Outside the walls, Pyrrhus surveys the damage. His face is tight with frustration. He has fought Romans and Macedonians, but never people who seem to thrive on hopelessness. His officers urge him to wait for dawn, to rest, to attack again when morale is low. But Pyrrhus doesn't wait. He's a creature of momentum. His pride demands a second assault, even as the smoke from the first still smoulders. He orders a new plan. This time, he will breach the walls before Areus can return. Time, not strength, is now his enemy. His engineers begin to construct siege towers. From within the city the Spartans can hear the hammers, the chains, the crack of timber. The sound echoes through the night like a heartbeat, a reminder that dawn will bring blood again. But Areus is on his way. In Crete, word of the siege has reached him. He gathers his mercenaries, boards ships under moonlight, and sails across the Aegean in haste. By the time Pyrrhus readies his final assault, the Spartan king will be at his doorstep, carrying the fury of every homeland burned and every oath unbroken. For now, though, the city holds its breath. Smoke still curls above the ramparts, and the stars glimmer faintly through the haze. You can almost hear the whisper of ancient ghosts walking the walls, Leonidas, Brasidas, the nameless dead of Thermopylae. And you know, as they do, that Sparta's heart still beats. Tomorrow, Pyrrhus will test it again. The night air over Sparta is thick with smoke and tension. The fires from the previous assault still flicker in the distance, throwing the shadows of broken ladders across the plain. The silence that follows feels heavier than battle itself, the kind of quiet that comes only when both armies are too exhausted to move, too proud to retreat. Somewhere beyond the walls, Pyrrhus of Epirus sharpens his vengeance. Inside, the Spartans dig in, bloodied but unbowed. In the narrow lanes, torches glow like fireflies. Boys too young to fight carry buckets of water. Women drag the wounded into homes, binding cuts with torn cloaks. The city's elders walk the ramparts, whispering prayers to the old gods. Ares for fury, Artemis for endurance. Every man and woman knows dawn will bring another attack, and that the next one may be their last. Chelidonis, the daughter-in-law of King Areus, walks among the defenders. Her armour is streaked with soot, her hair bound back with a crimson cord. She has not slept. When one young hoplite hesitates at his post, she stops beside him and says quietly, "You were born Spartan. You'll die Spartan." Between those two there's no fear. The boy straightens his back and grips his spear. Below in Pyrrhus's camp, the king of Epirus paces before his tent. His soldiers watch him nervously. He's not a man who handles frustration well. The night before, he'd expected a swift victory. A few walls climbed, a city taken, a legend secured. Instead, he'd been humiliated by trenches, by old men and women who fought like demons. It burns him. His lieutenants approach cautiously. "My king," one begins. "Perhaps we should wait for reinforcements." Pyrrhus cuts him off with a glare. "Reinforcements? Against farmers and women?" He gestures toward the city. "They hide behind dirt and superstition. I'll bring their walls down before their king returns." He orders the siege renewed at dawn, not by stealth or trickery this time, but by sheer force. "They'll see the sky itself fall on them," he growls. The engineers work through the night, rebuilding towers, filling in trenches, assembling ramps of wood and stone. In the flickering light, their tools ring like hammers on a coffin. The elephants are brought forward again, their tusks capped in bronze. Their handlers feed them wine mixed with honey to dull their fear. When they trumpet, the hills echo with the sound of something prehistoric, as if the gods themselves are clearing their throats. Inside the city, the defenders watch from the battlements. The sight of the looming beasts, their eyes red in the torchlight, sends a ripple of unease through the lines. "They're not men," a soldier mutters. "They're monsters." Chelidonis hears him and answers dryly, "Then let's remind them monsters bleed." By dawn, the air hums with heat. The sun climbs, the trumpets blare, and Pyrrhus gives the order. The ground shakes as the elephants charge, the wooden towers creaking behind them, the sky thick with arrows. The Spartans brace themselves. The first elephant hits the trench, falls, and thrashes wildly. A shower of oil and fire follows. The defenders hurl javelins from above. The beasts scream, trampling their own lines. The air fills with the stench of burning hide. Pyrrhus curses and waves his arm. "Forward! Close the gaps!" His infantry surges ahead, stepping over bodies and wreckage. The battle turns chaotic. Smoke, shouting, confusion. Spartan women run water and spears to the walls. Chelidonis, her spear in hand, fights beside the line, striking at men who try to scale the ramparts. One soldier grabs her arm and shouts, "Lady, fall back!" She jerks free, spits dust from her mouth and shouts back, "When the city's safe, I'll think about it." By mid-morning, the fighting reaches a fever pitch. The walls are cracked but not broken. Every street has become a fortress, every doorway a trap. From the hills, smoke and cries mingle with the clanging of iron. And then, a new sound, distant at first, like a drum beat. The defenders freeze. Even Pyrrhus pauses, frowning. It grows louder, rhythmic, disciplined, unmistakable. Marching. Over the ridge to the east, the banners of Areus I appear, crimson cloaks fluttering, shields gleaming in the sun. Behind him, the Spartan army returns from Crete, hardened mercenaries, fresh hoplites, men who've never lost the taste for battle. A roar goes up from the city. The defenders shout, "Areus! Areus has come!" Pyrrhus's officers exchange uneasy glances. They've fought Spartans before, but never two armies at once. One behind the walls, one descending from the hills. The Epirot king clenches his jaw. "Let him come," he mutters. "He'll find nothing left to save." But deep down, even Pyrrhus knows the moment has shifted. The element of surprise is gone. The siege is broken. What began as a hunt has turned into a trap. As the day fades, Pyrrhus's army pulls back to regroup. The field outside the walls is strewn with the wreckage of war. Shattered towers, smoking trenches, broken shields, and the bodies of men and beasts alike. The Spartans stand atop their ramparts, bloodied and exhausted, watching the enemy retreat. Chelidonnis, leaning on her spear, exhales for the first time in days. "They'll come again," someone says behind her. She nods, her eyes fixed on the distant campfires of Pyrrhus. "Then so will we." Beyond the valley, the returning king marches closer. The red cloaks of his army ripple like flame in the evening wind, and with them comes the vengeance of Sparta. Dawn breaks over the Eurotas River, and the red cloaks of Areus must shimmer like embers in the morning mist. The king of Sparta has returned. His sandals strike the earth in rhythm with thousands of boots behind him. The sound of discipline, precision, and something more primal, fury. For a week, the city of Leonidas has stood alone, defended by its elders, its women, and its courage. Areus arrives not as a saviour, but as a storm come home. He halts on the ridge above the plain, the smoke of Pyrrhus's failed assault still curling below. The sight that greets him is both tragedy and triumph. Walls blackened by fire, towers toppled, the earth torn open by trenches, and yet Sparta still stands. From the ramparts the defenders cheer, hoarse but unbroken. Areus's lieutenants look to him for orders. He simply stares at the enemy camp in silence, his jaw tightening. "So," he says finally, "the wolf still has teeth." Below, Pyrrhus of Epirus prepares for another assault. His armour gleams in the sun, his hair streaked with grey, his temper sharper than any blade. The defeat has stung him. He's the man who once defeated Rome on its own soil, who stood toe-to-toe with Macedon, and now he's bled by a handful of citizens and women. Pride drives him more than strategy. When word reaches him that Areus has returned, Pyrrhus smiles, but it's a brittle, dangerous thing. "Good," he says. "Let him come and die for the ruins he loves." The two armies eye each other across the plain. Between them lies the wreckage of the past day's fighting, broken siege towers, the corpses of elephants, burned shields half buried in the dirt. Vultures circle lazily overhead. Areus rides forward alone, his cloak trailing behind him. He stops at the edge of the no-man's land and calls out to the Epirot camp, "Pyrrhus, son of Aeacides, you came to Sparta seeking glory. You found graves instead. Leave now, and I'll let your bones rest where they fall." Pyrrhus emerges, spear in hand, his horse pawing the dust. His men watch as two kings face each other across 100 paces of silence. "Old words," Pyrrhus calls back, "from a city that forgot how to win." Areus tilts his head. "And yet you couldn't break her walls." The tension crackles like lightning. Pyrrhus, ever impulsive, gives the signal to advance. "Enough talk," he growls. "Let's end this." The battle begins with the blare of trumpets. Pyrrhus sends his veterans forward in disciplined ranks, the best soldiers money and conquest can buy. They move like a tide of bronze. The Spartans answer with the ferocity that has defined them for centuries. Spears braced, shields locked, no music, no fanfare, just the drumbeat of sandals on dirt and the raw, rhythmic grunt of men who've known war since birth. The first clash is deafening. Spears splinter, shields crack, and the dust turns red. Areus leads from the front, his sword flashing like sunlight on water. Around him, the Spartan phalanx holds steady, driving the Epirotes backward step by step. Pyrrhus throws himself into the fray as well, striking down a hoplite with a single blow. His strength is undeniable. He fights like the heroes of Homer, reckless and magnificent. But Areus is fighting for more than victory. He's fighting for Sparta's soul. Every time Pyrrhus pushes forward, the Spartans counter with grim determination, fighting shoulder to shoulder, their discipline slowly wearing down the invaders' momentum. Then, as if the gods themselves can't decide whose side they're on, a dust storm sweeps across the plain. The wind howls. The armies vanish in a swirl of sand and smoke. Visibility drops to nothing. Soldiers shout to find their comrades. Lines blur, formations break. In the chaos, Pyrrhus's elephants panic, their handlers shouting in vain. One beast tramples its own men before collapsing in agony. When the dust clears, Areus sees his chance. He signals his right flank, a column of mercenaries fresh from Crete. They swing around, smashing into the Epirote line's exposed side. The sound of bronze meeting flesh fills the air. Pyrrhus's forces waver. For the first time in the battle, his men begin to fall back. He rides through the ranks, trying to rally them, shouting, "We're not beaten yet. Push forward." But even his charisma cannot mask exhaustion. His veterans are bleeding, his elephants dead, his pride wounded beyond repair. By sunset, the Epirot line collapses. Pyrrhus withdraws toward the north, his army shattered but not destroyed. He curses the gods, the dust, and the stubborn ghosts of Sparta. His dream of conquering the Peloponnese lies in ruins. Areus watches from the ridge as Pyrrhus's camp burns. He doesn't cheer, he doesn't smile. He simply turns to his men and says, "Bury the dead." They fought as Greeks. That night, Sparta celebrates not with feasting, but with silence. The fires are extinguished. The wounded sleep where they fell. Chelidonus walks among the survivors, her armour streaked with blood and ash. When she finds her father-in-law, she kneels before him. "The city still stands," she says softly. Areus nods. Then so does Greece. In the distance, Pyrrhus retreats northward toward Argos. One last desperate gamble, one last bid for immortality. The Spartans don't follow. They've done their part. As the stars rise over the valley, the ruins of the siege glow faintly in the moonlight. Sparta, scarred but unbeaten, breathes again. And somewhere beyond the hills, fate sharpens its blade for the next city in line. The road north from Sparta winds through the rocky hills of Laconia, the summer air thick with dust and the smell of olive trees. In the distance, thunder rolls, not from the sky but from the feet of a retreating army. Pyrrhus of Epirus, battered and humiliated, leads his weary men away from the city that refused to fall. Behind him trail the remnants of his once proud host, wounded soldiers limping beside burned-out elephants, mercenaries muttering prayers to gods who clearly stopped listening. For a king who once dreamed of empires, the silence of this retreat is unbearable. He rides ahead, jaw tight, armour streaked with soot, eyes burning with fury. He has faced the strongest powers of his age, Rome, Macedon, Carthage, and somehow it is the smallest of them all, Sparta, that has humbled him. At his side rides his son Helenus, young and loyal, still trying to match his father's fire. "We'll regroup at Argos," he says, voice uncertain. "The city favours Macedon, not Sparta. They might open their gates." Pyrrhus's lips curl into something halfway between a grin and a snarl. "Argos?" he repeats. "Yes. If they won't give me glory, I'll take it from their stones." Argos lies ahead. A city older than legend, proud of its lineage and fiercely independent. Nestled at the foot of Mount Larissa, its white walls glint in the sun. But Argos has always been caught in the tug-of-war between stronger powers. Sparta to the south, Macedon to the north, Epirus now marching from the west. For years the Argives have balanced survival through diplomacy and compromise. But diplomacy dies when armies appear at your gates. When word reaches Argos that Pyrrhus approaches, the council gathers in the theatre. The citizens shout, the orators plead. "We must not provoke him," says one elder. Sparta may be our rival, but Pyrrhus is a wildfire. He'll burn the whole Peloponnese if we let him. Others disagree. He is a hero, they argue. He fought the Romans and lived. Better to welcome him than to fight him. The council splits, voices echoing through the marble chamber. Outside, the people murmur in fear. They've heard tales of Pyrrhus's elephants and his restless hunger for conquest. No one wants to face him, but no one trusts him either. Meanwhile, in the Macedonian court, Antigonus Gonatas, king of Macedon, hears of Pyrrhus's failure at Sparta and his march toward Argos. Antigonus smiles thinly. "So the lion limps," he says. Argos is one of his allies, and he won't let Pyrrhus take it without a fight. He gathers his troops and sends word south. "Hold your city. I am coming." In the hills above Argos, Pyrrhus sets camp. His men are restless, morale frayed. The Spartan campaign has drained them, but Pyrrhus refuses to rest. "We'll strike before Macedon arrives," he declares. "Argos will be mine before sunrise." He sends envoys to the city gates, offering peace in exchange for entry. The Argive council, terrified of choosing the wrong side, delays their answer. As night falls, torches flicker along the walls. Inside the city, the people whisper prayers to Hera, the ancient guardian of Argos. Then, sometime after midnight, Pyrrhus loses patience. He orders his men to advance in silence. "If they won't open the gates," he says, "we'll open them ourselves." The plan is madness. Brilliant, reckless, exactly the sort of thing Pyrrhus was born for. His troops move under the cover of darkness, wheels muffled, armour wrapped in cloth. They approach the western gate, known as the Dara's Gate, where sympathisers within the city have promised to unbar the doors, and indeed as Pyrrhus nears, the gate creaks open. A handful of Argive traitors beckon him in. He gestures for his vanguard to move, archers, then hoplites, then his elephants. But in the cramped space, chaos erupts. The elephants balk at the narrow passage, their tusks scraping the walls. One panics, trumpeting so loud it wakes the city. Within minutes, Argos explodes into confusion. The citizens, thinking they're betrayed, rush to arms. Bells ring, women shout from windows, soldiers pour into the streets, unsure who they're fighting. Torches flare along the rooftops. Pyrrhus curses under his breath. "Forward!" "Into the square," he shouts. His men push through the gate, but the bottleneck strangles their momentum. Behind them, another elephant falls, blocking the passage entirely. The narrow streets of Argos twist like a labyrinth. The city was built for beauty, not battle. As Pyrrhus's troops spill into the alleys, they lose formation. Every turn is a trap, every corner a kill zone. Argive archers fire from rooftops. Stones rain down from balconies. The night echoes with the chaos of battle, shouts, screams, the bellow of wounded beasts. Outside the walls, Areus's army has arrived. The Spartans have followed Pyrrhus north, joined by Macedonian reinforcements under Antigonus. From the hills they see the fires rising inside the city. Areus gives a grim smile. "Let him have his glory," he says. "He'll drown in it." Inside Argos, the once proud conqueror of Rome finds himself trapped in a maze of stone and fury. His soldiers can barely see through the smoke. The narrow streets deny his cavalry, his elephants, even his skill. For the first time in years, Pyrrhus's confidence wavers. He's no longer fighting armies. He's fighting walls, shadows, and fate itself. At dawn, as the bells of Argos toll, the invader who once terrified empires stands hemmed in by ordinary citizens, and the gods, it seems, are watching closely. Morning breaks over Argos, and the city is an inferno of confusion. The alleys echo with screams and metal, the acrid scent of smoke mingling with the sharp bite of bronze and blood. From the citadel on Mount Larissa, you can see the whole nightmare unfold. Narrow streets choked with soldiers, elephants crashing through markets, and rooftops alive with defenders hurling stones and javelins. What began as a daring night assault has turned into chaos. Pyrrhus of Epirus, king of kings, stands at the heart of it, his armour dark with soot and sweat. The plan had been simple. Enter Argos quietly, seize the central square, force the city to surrender before sunrise. But simplicity dies fast in the twisting lanes of Argos. The streets here are built for poets and processions, not for war elephants. Now, the elephants panic, their handlers shouting frantically. One slips on the slick cobblestones, falls and crushes a dozen men beneath it. Another slams sideways into a house, splintering beams and sending the upper floor collapsing onto both armies. The noise is deafening. A roar of trumpets, screams, and shattering stone. Pyrrhus pushes through the carnage, his sword flashing in the dim light. Around him, his personal guard, the Molossian companions, fight like wolves. "Forward!" he shouts, his voice cutting through the smoke. "To the marketplace!" The square is ours, but every turn brings new resistance. The citizens of Argos, awakened by the clamour, have rallied. Men, old and young alike, pour from their homes, fighting in sandals and cloaks, armed with whatever they can grab. Kitchen knives, farming tools, broken spears. Even women join in, leaning from balconies to drop stones or boiling water on the invaders below. Is not an army Pyrrhus faces now, it's a city possessed. At the far end of the street, the Argive council has taken command of the defence. Their leader, Aristippus, an old man in ceremonial robes, climbs the temple steps and shouts orders to archers positioned on the roofs. "Aim for the elephant's eyes," he bellows. "Blind the beasts and the men will falter." His words find mark. Arrows streak through the smoke, striking down handlers and beasts alike. The elephants, screaming and sightless, thrash wildly, smashing friend and foe with equal fury. The streets fill with the sound of breaking tusks and the dull crunch of collapse. Pyrrhus's frustration boils over. "Cowards! Come down and fight me face to face," he roars, kicking open a doorway to clear a path. His men cheer, following his example, hacking through barricades and corpses alike. The king's fury cuts a swath through the chaos, a flash of gold and crimson, death in motion. Then, from the eastern gate, a new trumpet sounds. Areus I of Sparta has arrived. His red-cloaked hoplites pour into the city, the sound of their sandals a rhythm of doom. Behind them, Antigonus Gonatus's Macedonian troops follow, sealing every exit. Pyrrhus's army is trapped, surrounded in the city's heart. From a rooftop, an Argive lookout spots the encirclement and shouts, "The Spartans are within!" The Macedonians close the gate. A wave of cheers ripples through the defenders. To Pyrrhus's men, it's the sound of doom. Inside the square, Pyrrhus realizes the truth. He's caught between three enemies: the Argives, the Spartans, and the Macedonians. But retreat is impossible. The gate is blocked by one of his own fallen elephants. The enormous creature lies dying, its trunk curled like a burned tree root. The passage beyond is sealed with bodies and rubble. The king turns to his son Helenus, who's fighting beside him, his face smeared with blood. "Signal the rear guard," Pyrrhus shouts. "Clear the gate. We withdraw." Helenus nods, leaps onto his horse, and gallops toward the entrance. The young prince raises a torch to signal retreat, but the soldiers outside misunderstand. They think it's a call for reinforcements. And so, in the most disastrous irony of the war, a second wave of Epirot troops pushes into the gate, pressing against the trapped men inside, jamming the passage completely. The screams are unbearable, soldiers crushed, elephants panicking anew, the air thick with dust and death. Pyrrhus stares in disbelief. "The fools! They're killing us!" he shouts. He knows then that the gods have abandoned him. The fighting turns desperate. From every street, arrows whistle, stones crash, and shouts fill the air. The Spartans close from one side, the Macedonians from the other. In the crush of bodies, Pyrrhus fights like a man possessed, cutting down anyone in reach. Even his enemies hesitate, awed by his rage. But chaos is the great equalizer. Amid the shouting and smoke, an Argive woman, standing on her rooftop, spots the gold-crested helmet of the invader below. She recognizes the king by his armor, the polished bronze, the white plume. Without hesitation, she seizes a heavy roof tile and hurls it down. It strikes Pyrrhus squarely on the neck. He staggers, stunned, as blood floods from the wound. His vision blurs. Before he can recover, an Argive soldier, a mere footman, lunges forward and drives his spear into the king's chest. Pyrrhus of Epirus, the man who defied Rome, who crossed mountains and seas in search of glory, collapses in the mud of an Argive street. His son Helenus reaches him moments too late. The boy falls to his knees beside the body, shouting for help, but the battle drowns him out. Around them, the Epirot army breaks. Men throw down their weapons and flee. The remaining elephants, maddened by blood and noise, crash into walls and fall dead among the ruins. By midday it's over. The streets of Argos are silent, but for the caw of crows. The fires smoulder, bodies lie in heaps. In the central square, Spartan and Macedonian officers meet amid the wreckage. Areus, dusty and scarred, looks down at the fallen Epirot king and murmurs, "So ends the son of Achilles, slain not by heroes but by wolves and women." He orders Pyrrhus's body returned to the Argives for burial. "He was a warrior," he says quietly. "Let him have peace." That night the citizens of Argos light lamps in every window, not in celebration, but in remembrance, for the dead, for the city, for the passing of an age. And as the stars rise over the still smoking rooftops, Greece breathes again, weary, broken, but free of one more wandering king. When the sun rises over Argos, the air is heavy with ash and silence. The proud marble streets that once rang with the steps of priests and merchants now lie buried beneath rubble. The smell of blood still clings to the air, mingling with the faint perfume of crushed myrtle from fallen gardens. The city that survived countless sieges has endured another, but this one will be remembered above all. At the centre of the square lies Pyrrhus of Epirus, his body still armoured, his face serene in death. The invincible king who fought Rome to a standstill, who defied Macedon, who stormed Sparta itself, is now just another corpse among hundreds. His once gilded helmet lies beside him, dented from the stone that brought him down. A trickle of dried blood runs across his jaw, catching the light like rusted bronze. Areus of Sparta stands over him, his red cloak stained with smoke and dirt. Around him, the survivors of both sides move quietly through the wreckage, gathering weapons, tending to the wounded, or simply staring in disbelief. War has a strange way of humbling even the victors. "Cover him," Areus orders softly. A pair of Spartan hoplites drape a cloak over the fallen king. The act is simple, but it carries weight. For all their enmity, both men were cut from the same ancient cloth, the last of Greece's warrior kings, born in a world that no longer has a place for them. As Areus turns away, a group of Argive elders approaches. Their leader, Aristippus, his robes torn and bloodied, bows deeply. "Sparta has saved us," he says, his voice trembling. "For that, Argos will not forget." Areus shakes his head. "You saved yourselves," he replies. "Sparta only arrived to finish what your courage began." The word spread through the crowd. Even the younger soldiers, weary and wounded, straighten their backs. For once there is no hatred between Argos and Sparta, only shared exhaustion. Meanwhile, Helenus, the son of Pyrrhus, kneels beside his father's body. His armour is cracked, his sword lost. He's barely more than a boy, and yet his face carries the hollow look of someone who has seen the gods turn their faces away. When Areus approaches, the young prince rises shakily, expecting death. Instead, Areus offers his hand. "Go home," he says simply. "Greece has buried enough kings." Helenus hesitates, then nods. His voice breaks as he answers, "He wanted to unite us." Areus studies the fallen body of Pyrrhus for a moment. "He nearly did," he murmurs. By midday, word of the battle spreads like wildfire through the Peloponnese. Messengers ride to Sparta, Corinth, Athens, Macedon. Everywhere people whisper the same story. Pyrrhus, the unbeatable, slain by a falling roof tile. His empire ended not by a general, but by chance. To some, it's a lesson in humility. To others, a divine warning that Greece is tired of kings. In Carthage, merchants shake their heads. In Rome, senators toast quietly, and in Epirus, the people mourn. Their king's body is returned under guard, carried across the sea in solemn procession. His tomb, they say, is built high above the river Acheron, where travellers can still hear the rush of water beneath the stones. But in Argos, life begins to move again. The fires are quenched, the bodies are burned or buried, the temples are scrubbed clean. From the walls, the citizens hang garlands in memory of their dead. The city that endured Perseus, Macedon, and now Epirus refuses to vanish. For Areus, victory brings no joy, only reflection. As he prepares to return south, he walks the empty streets with Chelidonus, his daughter-in-law, who came north after the siege. Her eyes still carry the hard light of Sparta's defenders, but her face softens when she looks at the ruins. "Do you think they'll ever stop fighting?" she asks. Areus exhales slowly, watching the smoke rise from a burned-out house. "No," he says, "but maybe they'll remember how much it costs." As he rides out of the city that afternoon, the people of Argos line the streets bowing in respect. Children scatter petals at the hooves of the Spartan horses. The king doesn't look back, but the sight of Argos, scarred yet standing, burns itself into his memory. Behind him, in the marketplace, the stone that killed Pyrrhus has already become a relic. The Argives set it in the temple of Hera, offering it to the goddess with a simple inscription, "To the gods who protect the city." It's a small thing, but in a land where every rock and ruin tells a story, it will outlast them all. By nightfall, the armies are gone. Only the wind remains, sighing softly through the narrow streets. The moonlight glints off broken spears and shattered shields. Somewhere, an owl cries, a reminder that Athena, goddess of wisdom and war, still watches over the cities of Greece, no matter how many times they rise and fall. And for one fleeting moment, Argos is silent, not in fear or grief, but in peace. The Peloponnese wakes slowly to the news that Pyrrhus of Epirus is dead. Across Greece the word travels from port to port, mountain to mountain, carried by merchants and messengers who speak it with disbelief. The eagle has fallen, Rhodas Seam. In taverns and temples alike, men shake their heads, as if saying it aloud might summon him back. For years Pyrrhus had been a storm that rolled across the world, first Italy, then Sicily, then Macedon, and finally Greece itself. He was the last man who made the ancient cities tremble. Now the storm has passed, leaving behind silence, ashes, and the faint smell of blood and smoke drifting across the land. In Sparta, the news is met not with celebration, but with solemn pride. King Areus I returns to his city to the sound of trumpets and chanting, but he rides in silence. The streets are lined with men and women who defended their home during the siege, their faces gaunt but proud. The scars of battle still mark the walls, charred beams, collapsed towers, and trenches filled with stones, yet the spirit of Sparta stands unbroken. At the temple of Athena Chalkioikos, Areus dismounts and lays his helmet at the altar. "The gods have given us another dawn," he says quietly to his people. "Guard it well, for there may not be many left." Sparta, for all its heroism, is not the Sparta of old. Its population has dwindled, its ancient discipline has frayed. The young men who fought Pyrrhus are brave but few, the old laws stretch thin by necessity. Areus knows it. The city has won a glorious victory, but glory is not enough to feed or rebuild it. Still, for one shining moment, the world remembers why the name Sparta once meant fear and respect in equal measure. Travellers who pass through the Eurotas Valley stop to gaze at the walls, the mountains, the red cloaks drying in the sun, and they whisper that the old blood still burns there. Meanwhile in Argos the city rebuilds. The people clean the marble, repair the market, and patch the scars left by the siege. The Argive council decrees a festival of thanksgiving to Hera, their patron goddess, for delivering them from ruin. The streets fill with music and incense, but beneath the celebration runs a deep weariness. They know they've witnessed the end of something vast, the last echo of an age when kings believed they could shape the world by sheer will. And across the sea, in Epirus, the mourning begins. The body of Pyrrhus is returned under heavy guard. His soldiers weep as they carry him through the gates of Ambracia, the capital he built as a monument to himself. The city is draped in black cloth. The priests of Zeus Aeneas chant solemn hymns, while the queen, Lanassa, watches in silence. She had once left him, weary of his endless wars, but even she cannot help feeling the pull of history. At his funeral his son Elenius stands before the pyre. He chased glory to the ends of the earth, the young man says. He found it, But glory has teeth. The flames rise high, painting the night red. Somewhere in the mountains the shepherds claim they see a white eagle circling the smoke, crying out before vanishing into the clouds. Back in Sparta, Areus receives a message from Macedon. King Antigonus Gonatas, the man who fought beside him at Argos, sends his congratulations and a warning. "We have seen the last of the great kings," the scroll reads. "What remains now are the men who know how to survive them." Areus folds the parchment and sets it aside. He knows what Antigonus means. Greece has changed. The city-states no longer decide their own fate. The age of hoplites and citizen armies is fading, replaced by the age of empires. And yet, Areus can't help but feel pride. Not just in Sparta, but in Greece itself. Against Macedon, against Epirus, against the creeping shadow of Rome, the old spirit still flickers. It is smaller now, but stubborn, like an ember refusing to die. One evening he stands on the city walls with Chelidonis, watching the sun dip below the Taygetus mountains. The fields beyond are quiet, their soil dark and rich. Farmers move like shadows between the olive trees. For the first time in months there are no war drums, no smoke, no cries. Chelidonis breaks the silence. "Is it over?" Areus smiles faintly. "Nothing is ever over in Greece," he replies. "Only forgotten, until the next fool remembers it." She laughs softly, the weary laughter of someone who's earned the right. The wind shifts, carrying with it the scent of sea salt and the far-off echo of temple bells from Argos. In the years to come, poets will sing of the night Pyrrhus fell, of the woman who threw the stone, of the Spartans who fought without a king, and of the king who came home too late but still in time. For now, though, the Peloponnese is quiet. The cities of Greece rest beneath a tired sun, their walls rebuilt, their hearts still restless. The age of heroes has ended, but the age of stories has just begun. And in every story told from Sparta to Epirus, one truth endures: even kings, no matter how mighty, fall. But the names of those who stood against them live forever. Years pass, and the dust of war finally settles across the Peloponnese. The scars left by Pyrrhus's invasion fade, but the memory lingers, etched into the marble of temples, whispered in the songs of poets, carved into the pride of cities that refuse to die. Greece breathes again, but it's an old man's breath, slow, shallow, and haunted by the echo of its own greatness. In Sparta, King Areus I becomes something rare for a Spartan. Not just a warrior, but a diplomat. He sends envoys across the Aegean, seeking alliances, trade, and relevance in a world now ruled by kingdoms far larger than his own. His court hosts foreign merchants and scholars. His sons train not only with the spear, but in philosophy. The old men of the Grusia grumble that Sparta is losing its soul, but Areus knows the truth. It's already lost long ago, buried beneath the ghosts of Thermopylae. Still, the city endures. The fields around the Eurotas bloom again. The women who once threw stones at Pyrrhus's soldiers now walk with baskets of olives and figs. The trenches have become irrigation ditches, the burned towers rebuilt. When Areus walks the streets, the people bow, not out of fear, but gratitude. He has given them peace, a strange, almost alien gift in Sparta. In Argos too, peace takes root. The city that survived the wrath of Pyrrhus rises anew, proud and radiant. Marble columns are restored, new statues carved, temples repainted in vivid red and gold. The marketplace hums again with traders from Corinth, Aegina, and Rhodes. But beneath the prosperity lies a quiet humility. Argos has seen the cost of defiance. It has learned that pride can kill faster than any spear. Every year the Argives hold a small ceremony in the square where Pyrrhus fell. The stone that struck him, smooth and unremarkable, sits beneath a simple inscription: "Here ended the dreams of kings." Children place garlands upon it, not knowing that they honour the end of an era. Old men nod to it when they pass, remembering how close the city came to ruin, and poets recite verses by lamplight, telling of the woman on the rooftop who ended a war with her hands. Across Greece, Pyrrhus's name becomes a legend, half warning, half admiration. Philosophers debate him, generals study him, and parents tell their sons his story when they speak of ambition and fate. Even in distant Rome, senators whisper about him as the man who taught them what victory could cost. His phrase, "Another such victory and I am undone," becomes a proverb that will outlive empires. But for Areus, the story isn't about Pyrrhus's fall, it's about what comes after. He knows that glory burns fast, but peace must be fed daily like a fragile fire. He spends his later years strengthening Sparta's ties to other Greek cities, forming leagues and alliances that might, one day, stand against the looming shadow of Macedon. And beyond Macedon, something even greater stirs: Rome. Merchants returning from Italy bring stories of disciplined legions, of strange laws and boundless ambition. Areus listens in silence. He's too old to see it, but he knows instinctively that another storm is coming, one that will sweep away the last fragments of the world he knew. When he grows sick, the city gathers in the temple of Apollo. Chelidonice, now older and wise, visits him often. She sits beside the king as he looks out toward the mountains. "We fought well," he murmurs one night, "but we were fighting time itself." She smiles faintly. "Then we won for a while?" He chuckles, a rare sound in Sparta. "For a while," he repeats. When Areus finally dies, the city mourns him not with lamentations, but with silence. His red cloak is laid upon the altar. The warriors who carry his bier march barefoot through the streets, spears reversed, the evening sun turning their armour to fire. The torchlight flickers over the faces of those who remain, men and women who have lived through the siege, the battle, and the uneasy peace that followed. They understand, perhaps better than any before them, what it means to survive the fall of an age. In Argos, news of his death reaches the council. The elders declare a day of mourning in honour of the Spartan king, a gesture unthinkable a generation earlier. Bells ring softly from the temples of Hera and Apollo, echoing across the valley. For one moment, Argos and Sparta share something more powerful than rivalry: remembrance. The historians will later call it the end of the old Greece, the moment when the last of the city kings gave way to empires, when men like Areus and Pyrrhus vanished into legend. But the people living through it don't see an ending, only the quiet after the storm, the strange peace that comes when history itself stops to catch its breath. Somewhere between Sparta's ruins and Argos's restored walls, a traveller pauses on the road at dusk. The wind rustles through the olive trees, carrying the faint scent of smoke and salt. He looks toward the fading horizon and whispers, "They fought for gods and glory." We fight only to remember, and in that whisper lies the truth of all of Greece, that for every city that burns, another endures, and for every king who falls, a story rises to take his place. The years that follow Areus's death roll on quietly, like the slow current of the Eurotas River. The Peloponnese, long soaked in blood, begins to rediscover the rhythm of ordinary life. The clang of forges replaces the clash of swords. Fields once trampled by armies sprout with barley and vines. Yet, beneath the peace, Greece feels older, not in ruins, but weary, like a warrior laying down his spear after too many campaigns. In Sparta, Areus's young son, Acrotatus II, ascends to the throne. He inherits not an empire, but a memory, a father's legacy, and a city that refuses to surrender its pride. The warriors of his generation still train in the Argos, still march barefoot in the cold, but they do so more out of tradition than necessity. The world around them has changed. Strength alone is no longer enough. Gold now buys what iron once took. Acrotatus tries to follow in his father's footsteps. He reforms the city's alliances, reinforces ties with the Achaean League, and sends ambassadors to Macedon. But he lacks his father's patience. He is fiery, restless, more the son of Leonidas than of Areus. To him, diplomacy feels like surrender. Meanwhile, in Argos, life has settled into a fragile prosperity. The markets bustle, the temples gleam once more, and the memory of Pyrrhus's fall fades into story. The stone that killed him remains in the temple of Hera, but fewer visitors come to see it now. The generation that survived the siege grows grey, and the young grow up knowing only peace. Yet peace, in Greece, is never permanent. Tensions between the leagues, the Achaean, the Aetolian, and the rising Macedonian influence, stir again. Old rivalries smoulder, waiting for a spark, and as always, Sparta finds herself pulled back toward conflict, the weight of her history dragging her into battles she no longer has the strength to win. When Macedon intervenes in the Peloponnese once more, Acrotatus rides north with the Spartan army. He seeks to prove that his city still matters, that the blood of heroes still runs in its veins. The march is smaller now, fewer soldiers, older armour, but the pride remains enormous. Sparta does not die, he tells his men, it simply waits for the right war. In Argos, the council watches uneasily as the armies gather again. The city has no appetite for more wars, but geography gives it no choice. It lies between powers too proud to coexist. The Argives fortify their walls and call upon their alliances, fearing that the peace they've rebuilt will crumble like a dry amphora. When the Spartan army approaches Argive territory, memories stir. The elders still remember Areus riding past these same hills, the red cloaks glittering in the sun. But this is not that army, and Acrotatus is not his father. His campaign is reckless, impatient. He underestimates the shifting loyalties of the region, and the fact that Argos, now strengthened and rich, is no longer easy prey. The battle comes suddenly. On the plains outside the city, Spartan discipline meets Argive numbers. The two armies clash amid the olive groves, the air thick with dust and shouting. For a moment it feels like history repeating itself, the old rivalry reignited. But Sparta's strength is spent. Her soldiers fight bravely, but their phalanx breaks under the weight of numbers. Acrotatus himself leads a charge toward the Argive line, cutting deep into enemy ranks. He fights like his ancestors, fearless and unstoppable, until an arrow finds him between the ribs. He falls among the corpses of his guard, his blood soaking into the soil of Argive land, the same soil his father once saved. When the battle ends, Argos stands victorious once more. The Spartan army retreats south, leaderless, defeated. The body of Acrotatus is carried back to Sparta, wrapped in his scarlet cloak. The journey is long and silent. Villagers along the road stand in mourning as the procession passes, not out of mockery, but respect. Even in defeat, the Spartans carry themselves with that unmistakable haunting dignity. In the city, Chelidonnis receives the news. She's old now, her hair streaked with grey but her eyes still sharp as flint. When the soldiers bring her the cloak of her fallen grandson, she does not weep. She simply folds it carefully and places it beside the armour of Areus in the family shrine. "We have given enough to the gods of war," she murmurs. "Let them find someone else to feed on." For the first time in centuries, Sparta retreats from the stage of history. The once mighty city turns inward, its power spent, its legend intact. It will survive, but as a story, not a threat. In Argos, the victory feels hollow. The citizens celebrate, but even in triumph, there is melancholy. The old men remember Pyrrhus, Areus, and the wars that once seemed glorious. Now, the banners flutter over quiet streets, and the songs of victory sound like elegies. Somewhere between Argos and Sparta, the river Inachus flows calmly, winding past the fields where generations of Greeks have fought, bled, and buried their kings. The water runs clear again, as if washing away the memory of so much death. The historian Timaeus, writing from Sicily, will later say, "In that year the last fire of the Peloponnesian spirit went out." Perhaps he's right. The world is changing. The Macedonians rule, and Rome's shadow creeps closer with every passing decade. But for now, Greece sleeps under a fragile peace, dreaming of her former glories. The cities that once shook the earth with their names, Sparta, Argos, Thebes, Athens, now glow faintly in the twilight, like embers that refuse to die out completely. And somewhere in the night, beneath the same stars that watched Leonidas at Thermopylae and Pyrrhus at Argos, the wind whispers across the land, "Remember, the twilight of Greece arrives not with an explosion of war, but with the slow fade of greatness." By the middle of the 3rd century BCE, the Peloponnese has grown quieter, not peaceful, but tired. The world has moved on, and Greece, the mother of cities and philosophies, now finds herself surrounded by larger, hungrier powers. The thunder of armies has given way to the shuffle of envoys and the scratching of pens on treaties. In Sparta, the red cloaks still hang on their pegs, polished helmets gleaming in the morning light, but they're symbols now, relics rather than weapons. The Gerousia, the Council of Elders, debates endlessly over taxes and trade, not war. The Argos continues, but the boys train more for ceremony than for battle. Sparta, once a living myth, has become a museum of itself. Still, pride is not easily buried. The people remember Areus, the king who fought Pyrrhus and saved the city. They remember Chelidonis, who defied an invading army. And they whisper of Acrotatus, who died in Argive soil, one last echo of the old fire. One afternoon, Chelidonis, now in her final years, walks the walls overlooking the Eurotas valley. The fields are golden with harvest. Children play where once trenches burned. She leans on her staff, her gaze sweeping across the land her family fought to protect. Beside her walks a young girl, her granddaughter, curious and bright. "Tell me," the girl asks, "what was it like when the king from Epirus came?" Chelidonis smiles faintly, eyes lost in memory. "It was loud," she says after a moment. "The sky was full of fire. We thought it would be our end, but it wasn't. Sometimes the gods test you not to break you, but to remind you that you still live." The child tilts her head. "And grandfather? Did he win?" Chelidonis looks toward the distant mountains where the horizon blurs into haze. "He won what mattered," she says softly. "He came home." When she dies a few months later, the city buries her beside Areus and Acrotatus in the royal tombs, the last of a generation that saw Sparta's final blaze of glory. Her funeral is simple, quiet, but the people line the streets. They know they are saying farewell not just to a woman, but to an age. In Argos too, the passing years reshaped the city. The marble rebuilt after Pyrrhus's fall gleams whiter than ever. Its agora buzzes with merchants from Rhodes, Delos, and Alexandria. Statues of heroes line the streets. Perseus, Diomedes, and now Pyrrhus himself. The Argives, pragmatic as ever, honour even their enemies. In the temple of Hera, the stone that killed him still rests, worn smooth by time and by the hands of pilgrims who come to touch it. Each year, on the anniversary of the battle, the city holds a quiet procession. The priests pour libations to the goddess, thanking her for protecting the city. And at dusk, as the sun dips behind Mount Larissa, the women of Argos climb the rooftops with lamps, an ancient gesture of remembrance. They light the lamps one by one, the glow spreading across the city like stars returning to the earth. "Let no king forget what hubris costs," the high priestess says, her voice carrying over the rooftops. The tradition becomes known as the Night of the Lamps, and it lasts for centuries. Far away in Macedon, King Antigonus Gonatas grows old and cautious. He writes to his scholars about the folly of Pyrrhus, calling him a man too great for his time. In his letter to the philosopher Zeno, he writes, "The gods love balance. They gave Pyrrhus too much fire and not enough wisdom." The words spread, becoming a quiet epitaph for the age of the wandering kings, and yet the stories endure. Bards in taverns sing of the siege of Sparta where women fought beside men. Poets recite verses about the fall of Argos, the stone that felled the conqueror, and the night when 3 armies clashed in the narrow streets. Children in Epirus grow up hearing the name Pyrrhus the Unyielding, their parents retelling his victories, not his defeat. By now, the Romans have begun to rise, slowly, methodically. Their legions march where Pyrrhus once walked, their generals quoting his strategies, their historians writing of his bravery and folly alike. To them, he is both a teacher and a warning. He showed us what we could become, one Roman statesman says, and what we must never forget. The map of the world is changing again. The era of city-states gives way to the era of empires. Macedon and Egypt hold the Greek world in a tightening grip. But in the quiet corners, in the shrines, in the schools, in the stories, the old Greece endures. Philosophers debate the lessons of Argos and Sparta, whether courage or caution preserves a city longer, whether fate or pride destroyed Pyrrhus. The Stoics claim it was destiny. The Epicureans call it irony. The poets simply call it human. In the end, perhaps they are all right. The land itself remains the only witness untouched by the centuries. The same olive trees, the same rivers, the same mountains that watched men kill and die for glory. The wind that once carried the war cries of Pyrrhus and Areus now carries only the hum of cicadas. And if you stand at dusk on the hill above Argos, where the temple lamps still flicker in the distance, you can almost imagine the echo of hoofbeats on stone, the clash of bronze on bronze, the shout of warriors long gone. But it's only the wind, whispering their names, carrying their stories, keeping the memory of the last age of Greek kings alive in the heart of a world that has already moved on. By the time the next generation comes of age, the stories of Sparta and Argos have turned into something else, no longer current history, but legend. Children learn them as cautionary tales, scholars quote them in lectures about fate and folly, and wandering poets embellish them in the squares of cities that have never seen war. The men who fought those battles are gone, but their ghosts still walk the land. The Greek world now lives under the long shadow of Macedon. King Antigonus Gonatas rules with a careful hand, balancing between diplomacy and dominance. The great cities of Greece, Athens, Corinth, Argos, and even Sparta, are still independent in name, but Macedonian garrisons watch their gates. The era of hoplites and heroic stands is over. In its place comes a quieter, subtler age of treaties, philosophy, and slow decline. Still, the spirit of rivalry never dies. Sparta and Argos, bound by centuries of blood and pride, continue to eye each other across the mountains. There are border skirmishes, political insults, the usual Greek dance of suspicion. But even in their hostility there is nostalgia. They know they are the last keepers of an old fire. In Sparta, the tomb of Areus I becomes a place of pilgrimage. Farmers from distant villages come to lay olive branches at its base. They whisper prayers not for conquest but for courage. The inscription on the stone reads simply, "He defended the city when others thought it could not stand." No boasts, no epics, just a single truth. Nearby, the shrine of Celidonis stands in a small garden of cypress trees. Women come there on the anniversaries of the siege, bringing offerings of wine and oil. Mothers tell their daughters, "Remember her when fear comes." The old traditions persist. Women training in wrestling and running, the same way Celidonis once did. Sparta still remembers how she saved them when kings were away. In Argos, the temple of Hera thrives more than ever. The Argives build a new colonnade around it, gilded with bronze and ivory. In the centre, they place a marble relief showing the moment of Pyrrhus's fall. The king beneath the city walls, the woman above, the tile frozen in the air between them. The inscription reads, "Strength bows to the hand of fate." Travellers come from across Greece to see it. Philosophers debate whether it was divine intervention or coincidence. Priests insist it was the goddess Hera herself who guided the stone. The skeptics just shrug and say, even kings forget to look up. Beyond these cities, the wider world changes swiftly. Egypt under the Ptolemies grows rich and strange, a realm where Greek and Egyptian gods mingle. Antioch and Pergamon rise as new centres of art and learning, and from the west the Romans expand, a disciplined, relentless force, their armies moving like a tide that never retreats. Old men in the Peloponnese remember Pyrrhus and mutter, "We've seen men like them before," but the young laugh it off. Rome is far away, beyond the Ionian Sea. Greece has seen countless conquerors come and go, Persians, Macedonians, Epirotes. Surely Rome will pass as they all did. But history has other plans. As the decades pass, Spartan ambassadors begin to appear in Rome, their tone increasingly cautious. The Senate, curious and amused, receives them politely. Roman scribes record the names of the old cities, Sparta, Argos, Corinth, Thebes, as if cataloguing stars in a fading constellation. The Republic admires Greek culture even as it prepares to devour it. In Argos, the philosophers discuss this new power. They speak little, one says, but when they do, the world moves. The merchants, pragmatic as always, begin to trade Roman goods, glass, bronze, and the curious new coin stamped with the twin heads of Janus. But amid all these changes, the memory of 272 BCE, the fall of Pyrrhus, the siege of Sparta, the salvation of Argos, refuses to fade. It becomes the hinge of an era, the dividing line between the world of heroes and the world of empires. In Athens, the dramatist Hermann of Sicyon writes a tragedy titled The Tile of Hera. In it, Pyrrhus is portrayed as a man cursed by the gods, undone not by weakness but by the weight of his own greatness. The play ends with the line, "The higher the crown, the easier the fall." The audience weeps, not just for Pyrrhus but for Greece itself. In the mountain villages the tale is simpler. The storytellers gather by firelight and say, "Once there was a king who fought the Romans and the Spartans and everyone in between. He won every battle but lost his life to a woman with good aim." The children laugh, not knowing they are laughing at history itself, and so, slowly, myth takes the place of memory. By the time the Romans finally arrive in Greece, their legions crossing the isthmus, their banners gleaming, the people of the Peloponnese no longer think of Pyrrhus as man. He's become a story, a symbol, a ghost from a brighter, bloodier time. On a summer evening, a Roman officer passing through Argos stops at the temple of Hera. He stares at the marble relief and asks an old priest, "Tell me, who was this king?" The priest smiles sadly. "A man who wanted to be Achilles," he says, "and like Achilles, he found his heel." The officer nods, thoughtful. "We have men like that in Rome," he replies. The priest chuckles. "Then your empire will have stories too." The wind rustles through the colonnade, carrying the faint scent of myrrh and dust. Outside, the world keeps moving, armies marching, empires rising, but the marble gods of Greece remain silent and eternal, watching another age begin. And somewhere, in the space between history and legend, the ghosts of Sparta and Argos still walk, proud, weary, and whispering their lessons to those willing to listen. When the Roman legions finally set foot in Greece, the land that once defied kings meets conquerors who do not speak of glory, only order. The year is 197 BCE, and the thunder of iron-shod sandals rolls across the same plains where Spartans once marched barefoot. To the Romans, Greece is not a rival, but a jewel, a treasury of wisdom, art, and history, but to the Greeks, it feels like a requiem. The soldiers of the Republic are efficient, disciplined, and utterly without romance. They do not fight for gods or honour, only for the Senate's command and the promise of control. Their red banners rise where once flew the blue of Macedon, the bronze of Sparta, the silver of Argos. Cities that once warred for centuries now open their gates one by one, weary of fighting. In Argos, the Roman general Titus Quinctius Flamininus enters the city as both conqueror and liberator. He speaks fluent Greek, quotes Homer, and promises freedom under Rome's protection. The Argives, pragmatic as always, welcome him with garlands and applause. "We are free," the herald announces from the steps of the Agora, though everyone knows freedom wears a Roman crest now. The temple of Hera, the soul of Argos, gleams brighter than ever. Priests burn incense for both Hera and the goddess Roma, hoping that flattery might preserve what swords could not. The old marble relief of Pyrrhus's fall remains untouched. A Roman officer, pausing before it, murmurs to a companion, "Strange, isn't it? A woman, a tile, and a king undone." The companion shrugs. "So it always is. We build empires, and they crumble under the weight of accidents. In Sparta, the story is darker. The city resists, not with armies, but with pride. Rome's diplomats find a people who bow to no one, who still march in silence, who still believe themselves chosen by the gods of war. But the world no longer fears Sparta. When Roman soldiers pass through the Eurotas Valley, they stare in curiosity, not terror. "So this is the city that defied Xerxes," one remarks. "It looks smaller. Yet even in decline, Sparta refuses to fade quietly. Its new leader, Nabis, calls himself king and tries to revive the ancient laws. He frees the Helots, reforms the land, and defies Rome with the same audacity that once made Sparta immortal. For a moment, it seems the old flame might flare again. Rome answers swiftly. Flamininus marches south. The armies meet outside the walls, and once more the red cloaks of Sparta face a foreign banner. But this time there is no miracle, no Chelidonus on the walls, no Areus returning from Crete. Rome crushes the rebellion, and Nabis' dream dies in the dust. The city is spared. Rome admires its legend too much to destroy it, but it is never the same. The Argos is disbanded, the barracks emptied. The once feared phalanx gives way to quiet farms and empty training fields. The red cloak becomes a costume for festivals. The songs of war become hymns of remembrance. One Roman historian visiting years later writes, "The Spartans still boast of Thermopylae, but their swords are rusted." He means it as mockery, but perhaps it's simply truth. The glory of Greece has become a story told in Roman villas, its heroes immortalized in marble instead of memory. And yet, the spirit refuses to die completely. In the evenings, as the sun sets over the Taygetus mountains, old men still gather in the agora to tell tales of the night Pyrrhus came, of the trenches and the fire, of women who stood where soldiers fell. The children listen with wide eyes. For a heartbeat the air seems to shimmer, and the old Sparta lives again. In Argos, life under Roman rule is gentler. The city prospers. The markets fill with Roman goods, glass, wine, olive oil, and silver coins bearing the faces of distant emperors. The people learn Latin, but never stop speaking Greek. The philosophers still debate in the agora. The sculptors still carve marble like living flesh. Rome may own Greece's body, but never her soul. The Temple of Hera continues to draw pilgrims. On quiet afternoons, Roman matrons light lamps there beside Greek women. They pray not for victory, but for endurance, something both peoples understand. The story of Pyrrhus is now retold in Latin plays, his hubris softened into tragedy. The audience applauds politely, never realizing that the king's ghost still lingers in the city that killed him. As decades turn into centuries, Rome itself begins to feel the same weariness that once claimed Greece. Empires, like men, age in circles. The marble roads crack, the statues crumble, and the libraries gather dust. In far-off Athens, a philosopher writes, "Rome thinks she rules the world, but the world is patient. All things end as Greece did, in beauty and silence." By then, Sparta and Argos are no longer rivals, no longer even powers, just two names in 1,000 scrolls, two quiet towns baking under the same indifferent sun. Their fields grow wheat where kings once fell, their rivers run clear again, the ghosts rest. But sometimes, when the wind passes through the olive groves, it sounds almost like the tramp of ancient feet, or the clang of shields in the night. Travellers pause and swear they hear it, the faint whisper of two voices, one proud, one defiant. Remember us. And Greece, even in ruin, always will. By the dawn of the 2nd century BCE, Greece has fully become a province of memory. The cities that once carved their destinies in bronze now write them in parchment, and the voices of kings have been replaced by the pens of historians. Yet beneath the polished marble and Roman order, something restless still stirs. The heartbeat of a people who once believed they could defy the world itself. In Argos, the marketplace thrives under Roman rule. Traders speak a blend of Latin and Greek, bargaining over silk, spices, and statues. A young sculptor chisels a new relief for the Temple of Hera, depicting not gods or kings, but ordinary citizens, farmers, mothers, children, the quiet survivors of history. When asked why, he answers simply, "Because they are what remains." Each year, the Night of the Lamps continues. Women climb the rooftops to light their fires, just as their ancestors did after the fall of Pyrrhus. But now the lamps shine beside Roman torches. The soldiers watch from the streets below, bemused but respectful. The sight of the flickering lights across Argos's rooftops has become something sacred, something beyond conquest. It is not rebellion, it is remembrance. In Sparta, the transformation is slower, sadder. The Agog, once the forge of iron soul, is a shadow of itself. The drills are shorter, the discipline softened. The Romans keep a garrison there, but they let the Spartans keep their customs, amused by their austerity. Visitors from Rome come to watch the ancient warriors train, much like tourists watching a reenactment of a vanished world. Still, pride lingers in small things. In the evenings, the elders gather by the Amyclaeon, the ancient sanctuary of Apollo, and speak of the old days. They tell the stories of Arius, Chelidonis, and the siege. To them, it isn't just history, it's scripture. They recite it with the rhythm of prayer. When the king was gone, the women held the walls. When the walls burned, the people stood. Sometimes travellers stop to listen. Romans, Macedonians, even Gauls. They all fall silent when they hear the tale. One legionary writing home says, "The Spartans may be few and poor, but when they speak of their past, you feel small beside them." Further north in Epirus, the tomb of Pyrrhus still stands above the river Acheron. The locals say his ghost walks there on stormy nights, pacing along the cliffs, searching for a battle that will never come. Fishermen swear they've seen a man in bronze armour staring down at the dark water, vanishing when lightning strikes. But to the scholars of the Roman world, Pyrrhus becomes something else, a paradox. Historians call him the brilliant fool, a man too skilled in war to understand peace. Roman generals study his campaigns in their academies, tracing every manoeuvre, every gamble, every narrow victory that bled him dry. The term Pyrrhic victory enters their language, a victory so costly it might as well be defeat. In Athens, a philosopher named Cleonides lectures on Pyrrhus to a hall of students. He could win battles, Cleonides says, but never his own desires. The gods grant us gifts, and then they watch to see how we destroy ourselves with them. His students nod, taking notes on wax tablets, unaware that centuries later the same could be said of Rome. Meanwhile, in Argos, the descendants of those who fought that final night live quiet lives. They are artisans, farmers, and merchants. But once a year, on the anniversary of the siege, the entire city gathers in the agora. The priests recite the ancient verses, and the crowd listens as the story of Pyrrhus's fall is told again. The king of Epirus came in the night. His elephants burned, his army broke, and from the rooftops a woman cast a stone, and with it the fate of empires. Children laugh when they hear it. It sounds impossible, like myth. Yet as the older men and women bow their heads, you can see the truth in their faces. They carry the memory not because it glorifies them, but because it reminds them that even the greatest fall to human hands. Across the sea, Rome begins to crack. The republic that conquered Greece is slowly devouring itself. Civil wars, corruption, the ambition of men who mistake power for purpose. To the Greeks it feels eerily familiar. They've seen this story before, they know how it ends. When news arrives that Corinth has been destroyed by the Romans in 146 BCE, its people killed or sold into slavery, a hush falls over the Peloponnese. Even in Argos, where Roman banners fly, people close their shutters that night. The philosophers whisper, "So ends Greece." But an old priest in the temple of Hera says otherwise. No, not ends. Changes. The gods sleep, but they do not die. He's right. Greece doesn't vanish. It transforms. Its philosophers teach Rome how to think, its artists teach Rome how to see, its legends teach Rome how to dream. The conquerors become the pupils. In time, even the Romans admit it. One senator writes, "We took their lands, but they conquered our minds." And so, in the quiet twilight of history, the ghosts of Sparta, Argos, and Epirus watch as the torch of civilization passes to a new empire. The marble of Greece fades, but its light reflects on Rome, and through Rome, on the world that will follow. Somewhere, in a forgotten valley near Argos, an old olive tree still grows among the stones of a ruined wall. Beneath it lies the same soil that drank the blood of Pyrrhus's soldiers. In spring it blooms white, in summer it bears fruit. And in autumn, when the wind blows from the sea, the branches whisper softly, as if telling the earth itself a story it can never forget. The centuries drift by, and the Greece that once forged legends becomes part of the empire it inspired. Roman roads cut through old battlefields. Aqueducts rise where hoplites once marched. The language of Homer merges with that of Caesar. The temples of Argos, Sparta, and Delphi stand in quiet dignity, their marble worn smooth by the fingers of pilgrims who no longer remember the names of the gods they touch. By the time the first Roman emperor's reign, The wars that once defined the land have turned to dust. The Peloponnese is now a land of scholars, poets, and shepherds. The same hills that echoed with war cries now carry only the lowing of goats and the laughter of children. Yet even as the world changes, the stories remain, carried from mouth to mouth, generation to generation, like embers passed through the dark. In Argos, the temple of Hera still stands, though its gold has faded and its columns are cracked. The stone that killed Pyrrhus sits in the same place it always has, untouched by time. A Roman pilgrim from Corinth kneels before it, whispering, "Fortuna est dea Graeca." Fortune is a Greek goddess. He leaves a coin beside the relic, though he knows the gods no longer answer. In Sparta, life has slowed to a gentle rhythm. The agoge is gone, but children still run barefoot through the fields, laughing in the dust. The city is a shadow of its former self, yet there is peace in that shadow. The people grow olives, sing hymns, and tell tales by the fire. At dusk, elders still gather near the river Eurotas and recount the stories of Areus, Chelidonis, and the night the women of Sparta held the walls. The children listen, wide-eyed, as if hearing a myth, not realizing they stand on the very earth that gave it life. A Roman traveller passing through the city records in his journal, "They have no empire left, yet they speak as if they do. Their pride is carved into their silence. Even ruin has its nobility." He is right. Sparta and Argos, once enemies, now exist side by side in quiet dignity. Two cities that survived their own legends. Their rivalry has softened into kinship, their histories woven together by the long thread of survival. When the annual Night of the Lamps arrives, a few Spartans even travel north to watch. They stand among the Argives as the women light their lamps on the rooftops, the glow rippling through the city like a memory reborn. For one night, the whole valley shines. Far away, the Roman world grows restless. Emperors rise and fall, legions mutiny, and the edges of the empire crumble. But in Greece, time feels slower, more forgiving. The marble ruins become symbols not of loss, but of endurance. Even Rome itself will one day fall, but Greece, the Greece of thought, of story, of spirit, will live on in every tongue that learns her words. Scholars in Rome, Alexandria and Antioch still read Greek. They study the campaigns of Pyrrhus, the philosophy of Athens, the discipline of Sparta. A senator named Marcus Varro once writes, "Greece is the ghost that haunts our glory. She died, but she teaches the living how to live." And so she does. By the time the centuries turn to dust and the empire splits in two, the old names remain like whispers in the stones. Pilgrims still walk the roads that connect Argos to Sparta, their sandals tracing the paths once walked by warriors. The rivers still run, the olive trees still bloom, and when the wind sweeps through the ruins, it carries more than air. It carries memory. Stand there, if you ever can. In the quiet of a Greek dusk when the sun bleeds gold across the marble hills, you'll hear it in the hush between cicadas, in the rustle of cypress leaves, in the faint hum of the earth itself, the echo of the siege, the cry of the elephants, the clang of bronze on stone, the shout of defiance that once shook empires, and still, somehow, lingers. And as night falls over the Peloponnese, you can imagine the lamps of Argos flickering to life one by one, their glow stretching out like a constellation across the valley, small flames against the endless dark, each one a promise that the story isn't gone, only sleeping, because that is Greece's gift to time, to die again and again, and yet never be forgotten. Hey guys, tonight we close our eyes on an ancient land that never really fades. The hills where Pyrrhus fell, the walls where Sparta stood, the temples where the gods still whisper if you're quiet enough to listen. So wherever you are in the world, whether it's midnight in Athens or morning in Los Angeles, drop a comment with your city and your time. Let's see who's still awake under the same stars that watched Greece rise, burn and endure. And as always, rest easy, dream deeply, and remember, even when the fires go out, history keeps its embers alive. The fires of war have long gone cold, and all that remains now is the hush that follows centuries of struggle. You can almost hear it. The soft hum of cicadas over marble ruins, the slow breath of the Peloponnesian hills beneath the moon. The swords are rust, the helmets dust, but the stories, they still linger, like the last notes of a song no one quite remembers how to finish. Somewhere among the olive trees, the ghosts of Sparta and Argos sit side by side at last. Chelidonus, Areus, Pyrrhus. All the names that once shook the earth are quiet now, their pride dissolved into the same soil that fed their fires. Yet when the wind stirs, it carries their voices faintly through the valleys, a murmur of courage, of mistakes, of glory that burned too bright to last. You stand where they once stood, watching the stars rise above the ancient world. The air smells of stone and sea salt, timeless and familiar. The lamps of Argos flicker in the distance, small flames against the vast dark, just like the memories that refuse to die. And in that silence, you realize something simple and beautiful. History never truly ends. It exhales, softens and sleeps, waiting for someone, maybe you, to wake it again. So close your eyes now. The wars are done, the kings are gone, and the earth is finally at peace. Let the ghosts fade into the night, their battles won, their stories told. Rest easy, traveller. You've walked through time tonight, and somehow you've made it back. Good night from the ruins of Greece, where even silence remembers,